desire, masculinity, repression. These are a few of the themes explored by Brokeback Mountain, a 1997 short story that was adapted into a 2005 movie. The film was directed by two-time Academy Award winner Ang Lee, who was immediately enticed by Annie Proulx's short story. I don't know why it hit me so hard. I cried. I read the short story first and the script afterward. It's a great adaptation, a movie out of a 30-page short story. It's very unfamiliar to me. Usually when something hits you, you're caught off guard. I think that's why. Hailed as one of the best films of the 2000s, Brokeback Mountain won 3 awards, including Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Director for Lee at the 78th Academy Awards. It was considered a momentous breakthrough for LGBTQIA+ relationships represented in popular culture, showcasing an artistic, realistic view on gay romance without leaning on traditional gay stereotypes, all while grossing $178 million worldwide. So how did this critical and commercial masterpiece convey the short story's thematic message and character dynamic on the big screen? Through a series of scenes examining Ang Lee's direction, Rodrigo Pietro's cinematography, and Geraldine Perroni and Dylan Titchener's editing, we will take a closer look at how the two art forms intertwine to tell the story of the two lovers. Like all great page-to-screen adaptations, the movie accentuates the literary messages, which are explained through words, through visual storytelling. From the short story, the theme of internalized homophobia strikes the reader as prevalent and permeating in our two titular characters, Ennis and Jack. They never talked about the sex, let it happen, at first only in the tent at night, then in the full daylight with the hot sun striking down, and at evening in the fire glow, quick, rough, laughing and snorting, no lack of noises, but saying not a goddamn word except once, and has said, "I'm not no queer." And Jack jumped in with, "Me neither, a one-shot thing, nobody's business but ours." From this quote, the two characters, despite clearly developing a romantic relationship with one another, choose to outright reject such a happening. Ultimately, the rest of their relationship over the course of the book is one of isolation. Isolation from family, society, with one another. In the movie, from one of its first shots, the relationship dynamic of Ennis and Jack are visually conveyed. A staple in character shots, a clear male gaze is established from Jack, whereas the male gaze shot would usually be established with the male protagonist staring upon a female love interest. The movie's gaze begins with Jack onto Ennis, who actively ignores making eye contact. Already, so much is established. This isn't a typical Hollywood heterosexual western. The story is about these two characters' homosexual relationship, with Jack being the initiative, outgoing partner, while Ennis is reserved, restrained. Later in the movie, as Jack and Ennis leave their place of work in the Brokeback Mountain, Lee continues the use of close-up shots to highlight the unspoken words. Notice how close Lee frames these two characters during this conversation, despite the seemingly typical subject matter. On the surface, they're simply discussing their plans for the future, but their faces are asking if they'll ever meet again. Notice how long the camera lingers on their faces between lines. As Jack drives away, he looks back at Ennis through his rearview mirror, seeing an image of a man against the mountains. This carefully crafted shot underscores his departure, hinting at the fact that things will never be the same for the two men. This idea persists when we switch back to Ennis' perspective, who collapsed in an alley after watching Jack leave. The building walls on either side of the character encroach on the frame, closing in on him and covering up the background. This closed-off feeling juxtaposes the stunning wide shots we've become accustomed to in this movie. This precise change in framing reflects the emotional change of these characters, who are now forced to hide their true feelings outside of the mountain, and will always be isolated by the metaphorical walls of society. Speaking upon how the title Brokeback Mountain was emphasized in filming, Ang Lee explains the titular setting as a character itself. So how do we treat or how do we say it so it looks manageable? So it's not a grand western where people disappear in it, but you use that as a dramatic element coping with characters. So it looks lovable, it's suggestive, it's romantic. Somehow to shoot it that way. So, in a way it's a western, but it's not really a western. Therefore, the mountain is not only a place of work for Jack and Ennis, but a place where their love first began. It also serves as a sanctuary, a safe haven for them to be isolated and share love with one another. The town is back to reality, back to societal homophobia and isolation. How is this expressed in the movie? Brokeback Mountain is emphasized with strikingly beautiful, natural sweeping vistas of the Alberta landscape and its plains and meadows, whereas the town looks dull, lacking beauty. The color palette and grading is also vibrant and full of lush blues and greens in the natural Brokeback Mountain, whereas the town features a lot of dull whites. Notice the color contrast between these two shots. The mountain is where they are together, somewhere else is more isolation. Let's take a look at another scene where creative cinematography, prop placement, and precise camera framing is used. As the scene opens, Ennis is in the foreground, surrounded by bottles of alcohol with his family in the background. The shot establishes a feeling of isolation. Ennis doesn't feel like a part of his family as a result of his internal struggles. Despite being the focus of the frame, he's small, taking up little space. However, when Jack arrives, he moves closer to the camera and takes up the entire frame, which shows his excitement and desire. This close framing continues as Jack and Ennis embrace for the first time in years, helping to emphasize the physicality of their love. Allowing them to take up so much of the frame also demonstrates how comfortable they are with each other. This rule is broken only one time, when Alma looks outside and sees her husband kissing another man. The next shot is from her perspective, and once again, physical distance represents emotional distance. Alma feels betrayed, hardly able to comprehend why Ennis would be kissing another man. When Ennis goes back inside to introduce Jack to Alma, there's an interesting difference between the beginning of the scene. While Ennis and Alma are still separated by a line down the middle of the frame, Jack and Ennis share their space on screen, not allowing Alma to join them. As the scene closes, Alma makes an attempt to join their space, but is left alone in the house. The masterful blocking employed by Lee provides subtle insight to the emotional yearnings of the characters, as well as the relationships between them. The characters are isolated, not only in the context of the story, but quite literally through visual storytelling. Another way that Lee explores the mindsets of his characters is through the background environment and composition of scenes. Let's look at the most famous line from the movie, "I wish I knew how to quit you." First, notice the difference between Jack's background and Ennis's background. Jack is framed against the mountains, but intentionally blurred and out of focus. On the other hand, Ennis is framed against the trucks they drove up in. His background is much sharper and easier to see. This choice gives us a chance to get inside the mind of each character. Jack is much more idealistic, having pushed for the two of them to run away and start a new life together. He believes that there's a future for the both of them. The blurry but beautiful mountain in the background extends his thoughts. However, Ennis is much more grounded in reality, framed with a device of transportation which invokes society. He's cautious around Jack, still refusing to accept his true feelings after all these years. His repeated adherence to gender expectations of masculinity have alienated him from everyone he's close to. However, when the scene ends, we get a brief glimmer of hope. As Ennis joins Jack against Brokeback, it seems there might be a happy ending for the story after all. Speaking on famous lines, Brokeback Mountain intentionally differs in performance and dialogue from most Hollywood romance movies. As stated before, the camera lingers on the two characters during their conversations, with there often being silence in between the words. The characters don't engage in rapid-fire dialogue about their relationship.
What do you mean?
We're not dating anymore, I'm sorry.
Is this a joke?
No, it's not.
You're breaking up with me?
Instead, silence and blank stares dominate Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal's performance. This aspect is even explicitly mentioned by Jack and Ennis' earlier conversation.
Man, that's more words than you spoke in the past 2 weeks.
Hell, that's the most I've spoken in a year.
The characters give emphasis into communicating with their eyes, expressing their true emotions and feelings with eye contact. In a world and society that forces Ennis and Jack to seal their mouths, the only way to communicate is a dialogue of silence and gazing into the eyes. In the final shot of the movie, Ledger's incredible performance shines through. Lee's framing techniques are still prevalent, enhancing the mood and emotions of Ennis without a word being spoken. Ennis' eyes express his emotions for him, without ever breaking down or sobbing as one would expect from most movies, all leading to the ambiguous last line of the movie,